In its 10 appearance, Crying Child, who we see in the FNAF 4 minigames, originally had no character name associated with him. At first, he was just the Crying Child that had a striped shirt and tears going down his face. This was actually the beginning of the speculation as to who these animatronics were possessed by. Originally, thanks to his appearance, we thought that the Crying Child was the puppet, since the puppet had a similar arm pattern to the child's shirt, and the streams of tears down his cheeks closely resemble that of the puppet's purple streaks. However, this was later proven to be false when we literally saw the puppet and Charlotte combine in FNAF 6. Well, we knew that it wasn't true beforehand, but it was finally, confirmed in FNAF 6. The appearance of the Crying Child really threw us for a loop. This character has honestly been so problematic with the lore of the series. He's caused so many things to go awry. My god. In at 9, family. This kid has one messed up family, okay? Now I want to get one thing straight. The Crying Child is not Michael Afton. Originally we knew this, but then the security logbook made it seem like the Crying Child was Michael Afton, which confused us because how could he have gotten chomped but then still end up going to dismantle his father's enterprise? But that's not the case. Michael Afton is the Crying Child's brother, the one who wears the Foxy mask and scares him regularly. This kid is also the son of William Afton, mostly known as the Purple Guy, the man behind the slaughter, the main killer of the series. Springtrap, Scrap Trap, Will Trap, Breaker of Chains, and father of deceased children. The Purple Guy is this kid's father, okay? And it's pretty messed up because, well, the kid found out, which sets up a whole load of other possibilities as to if the chomp was really an accident and stuff, but let's not get into that. And at 8, the Bite of 80, what? The FNAF games are amazing at setting up mystery and dividing the community on certain things. The identity of Springtrap is one of them. There is probably still people who are certain that Michael Afton is Springtrap thanks to the end cutscene of Sister Location. However, this isn't the case, okay? I'm gonna say this for it's not the final time. It's William, guys. But the other thing is that everyone was divided on the Bite. The Bite of 87 is the most famous date in FNAF lore. It was revealed in the first game as an incident that got someone's frontal lobe bitten off by an animatronic in 1987, which made all animatronics lose free-roaming privileges during the day. What we see in the FNAF 4 minigames, however, does take place during 1983, as shown on the TV and in the 1983 Easter egg that has the cameras showing the FNAF 4 house in Sister Location. If you type in 1983, you get the FNAF 4 house. 1983 equals FNAF 4. The chomp, as I'm calling it, does indeed take place in 1983 instead of 1987, so there you go. And it's 7, Astro Boy. When we thought the Crying Child was indeed Michael Afton, we had to find some reason for how this could be possible. So in typical theory fashion, we turned to other media. The media we turned to in this case was the original FNAF book trilogy, which ended with the 4th Closet, which kept making me think that there were 4 books in that series, but that's aside the point. In the book, we learn that Henry built his daughter into 4 different robots. That's what the title means, 4th Closet. Implanting memories in each of them so that she could grow up even after death. So, after hearing that there were hyper-realistic robots that were so realistic they can turn other characters on, it felt free to assume that the same thing happened to Michael. That after getting chomped, Henry was so stricken with grief after losing 2 kids that he rebuilt him as a robot, and that robot went on to get scooped and everything else. But this isn't true, because in at number 6, death. The Crying Child does indeed die when getting chomped, as we see in the FNAF 4 final cutscene where Michael puts him in the mouth of Golden Freddy, even though the Crying Child is terrified of them. His tears moisten the spring locks, and then just like his father, he gets subjected to a spring lock failure. But Crying Child actually dies. He is rushed to the hospital, but death in the form of Nightmare gets him. We hear the sound of a flatline as he dies. As he dies, however, he meets the spirits of his old friends, the missing children, who say that they're still his friends and that while yes, he's broken because his father is a killer and that everything he loved ended up killing him, they will put him back together. While tragic, at least he got to spend the afterlife with the people he loved the most, who were taken from him too soon at the hands of his dastardly father. And his brother, Michael, will spend the rest of his life repenting for his sins and the accidental killing of his brother by dismantling his father's criminal empire. Oh wait, the Missing Children's incident was in 1985, wasn't it? Halfway through at number 5, Friendly Fan. In the beginning, the Crying Child actually loved the Fazbear animatronics. His father made them, so of course he would. He would go there on a regular basis. He had plushies of the original 5, and his sister even had a Funtime Foxy. The crying child in reality loved everything his father created, until he witnessed the true nature of what his daddy done did. His father created a robot that was meant to trap children inside, which is probably why he told them to stay away from Baby, but Elizabeth didn't listen, and when she got close after crying child I'm sure warned her against it, she got grabbed, taken by a robot arm reaching out of Baby's stomach, pulling her inside and killing her. He saw all this happen before his very eyes, and what was once a love for the characters his father helped create quickly turned into hatred and fear for what his dad had made. And for mistaken identity. This isn't uncommon with FNAF characters. We think we know who they are, but then they turn out to be someone else entirely. We thought that Golden Freddy was Cassidy, now it could be multiple souls. We thought that Michael was Springtrap, but he isn't. We thought he could be Scraptrap, but he isn't. We have mistaken so many characters for who they are, it's probably making Scott very happy. But we have not done that as much with any other character than we have with the Crying Child. The Crying Child has been thought to be the puppet Golden Freddy, currently one half of Golden Freddy, Michael Afton, and other various names given to him by the community, but we don't know if any of these are true. We know which ones aren't true, but we only think that the Crying Child is part of Golden Freddy. It could be, since he tells Michael it's me, but we know that Michael looks a lot like his father, so maybe it's Cassidy saying it's me, the one you should not have killed, to someone that she thinks is William. There are so many variables, and there isn't enough information to really make a good guess, but we're still trying. Don't get me wrong, I believe that he is a part of Golden Freddy, but I'm just saying that we don't know for certain. But what we do know for certain is that in at number 3, unnamed. The Crying Child has never been given an official canon name. He isn't Michael, he isn't Chris, no official canon source has named him. He isn't named Chuck like he is in Step Closer, and he isn't named Stan. He has been given no canon name from any source, so if people are arguing with you about his name and saying that he has one, feel free to direct them to this video and say that no, he doesn't. Hi, all the people who are being told no he doesn't. Because on no official wiki is he labeled as Chris Afton, always the Crying Child. So please, for the love of sweet baby Rays, stop saying that he does, okay? Don't call him Chris or Chuck or Stan or Dipper or Charles or hell even Prince Clifford Tuckett III. No name has been associated with this character other than the Crying Child. He isn't the puppet, he could be Golden Freddy, and he isn't Michael. Well, he could be Michael, but that's a theory for another list. It's a long story. We don't know his name, and you're just gonna have to accept that. I'm sorry, but it's true. Penultimately, in at number 2, Scarred. The Crying Child has clearly been scarred by the things he's seen. He may not have witnessed the missing children's incident since it does take place in 1985, but there is clearly some mental trauma that he has dealt with. The nightmare animatronics that are usually viewed as being seen by the Crying Child have mouths for their stomachs, clearly showing the location of the animatronic arm that Baby used to scoop Elizabeth up. The child became so fearful of these restaurants that he began to collapse and fall to the ground crying whenever he came close to one of the animatronics, even if it was just a man in a suit. The way we've seen this child evolve is clearly showing us his mental trauma and scarring that has happened over such a short amount of time too. At least he got a break from it all, you know, in death, when the friends he once had can put him back together. Finally, in at number 1, Legacy. This kid, while he may be fictional and, you know, dead, still has a whole legacy in the FNAF universe as well as our own. This kid is the reason the FNAF franchise exists, and while yes, he wasn't the first to die, he still was the reason for Michael starting to go around and trying to set the souls free, thus leading to FNAF 1. So while he may not have been the reason for FNAF 1 when it was released, he sure is the reason for it now. This kid has dealt with so much trauma, with having a father as a serial killer, seeing him kill a kid and stuff him, probably being friends with the original missing children, and then getting killed at the hands of Fredbear by your brother after your crying moistened the locks and made him chomp down on your head, then having hallucinations in the hospital that nightmare versions of the animatronics you once loved are coming after you. Jeez. It's pretty sad when you think about it. Poor kid. In at 10th, possession. The main idea of possession in the FNAF universe is that you're around the object you're possessing, whether it be an animatronic, a toy, or a person. My question is, how would Crying Child have been around Golden Freddy if he dies in a hospital, as we hear thanks to the flatline at the end of FNAF 4? Cause like, it's either he's possessing William or Golden Freddy. So assuming the crying child dies in the hospital, as we're led to believe, how would Golden Freddy be close enough to actually get possessed? While yes, agony reaches out further from the body than any other emotion, it doesn't reach out that far. Not from the hospital to the pizzeria where you got your head squashed. The closest thing that we know ends up getting possessed by something is his father, which makes the most sense if he dies in the hospital. While you could argue that he died in Fredbear's mouth, there wouldn't be a need for IV, flowers, and pills, along with a heart monitor if he was dead from the moment that the animatronic bit down. So we know he didn't die in Fredbear's mouth. And at 9 limitations. We also see limitations of possessions other than actually being within proximity of the animatronic or object you possess. With what we've learned about agony and possession in the FNAF universe, nobody can really possess multiple large things at once. Sure, you can possess multiple small objects, as we see in the end of The Man in Room 1280, I believe is the story where that happens, but nobody has been able to possess multiple large or big ticket items like animatronics or people at once. This leads me to the conclusion that Cassidy and Crying Child have to be possessing two different things. Cassidy cannot be possessing Golden Freddy and William, and neither can Crying Child. So Crying Child is either Golden Freddy or the one you should not have killed. But we know that Cassidy is Golden Freddy thanks to the Happiest Day minigame Easter egg from the survival logbook. On the page asking about your happiest day, we can see the puppet giving a cake to a young girl with black hair. This same girl can be seen described in the FNAF novels and is named Cassidy. This combined with the Happiest Day minigame revolving around setting Golden Freddy's soul free indicates that Cassidy has been set free thanks to the good ending not showing the Golden Freddy head in the background. So, if she's Golden Freddy, Crying Child has to be possessing William. And at 8, Fredbear. One of the biggest points I see as to why Crying Child is Golden Freddy or part of Golden Freddy is because Fredbear gets turned into Golden Freddy. What? When was this mentioned? Because I don't recall this ever being a fact in the games, especially never confirmed. Like, it's just the theory that perhaps Golden Freddy was just Fredbear repurposed or something like that. However, if we're being honest, William would not have reused the animatronic that killed his son. Okay? He would have destroyed it. Plus, the shapes of Golden Freddy and Fredbear are way too different to actually have them be the same animatronic. Freddy's proportions are much smaller than Fredbear's because Fredbear is a spring-lock suit, so it would have to have enough room for a human and all the robot parts to be tucked away. Golden Freddy just doesn't have enough room for that, and it's a suit with no endoskeleton. So they cannot be the same animatronic. So Crying Child would either be Fredbear or the one you should not have killed, and Fredbear was nowhere near Crying Child when he dies in the hospital, unless they're just a really crappy hospital. And it's 7, Glamrock Freddy. This is definitely not the strongest point, but it's something that I felt like was worth mentioning anyway. The character of Glamrock Freddy in Security Breach is the first animatronic to help us not die in the series, and based on Funko statues, the animatronic's belly will open up and allow us to climb inside. This made many people compare Glamrock Freddy and Gregory to Crying Child and Foxy Bro. However, I don't think that this is actually a good example. I mean, I've done it myself, but I mean, let's be honest. Do Mike and his brother really have that good of a relationship? Do they seem like the kind of brothers to stick by each other's side like they're the Winchesters? Or do they look like they're the kind of brothers who would shove each other into animatronic mouths for a laugh, resulting in the brutal, albeit accidental, death of their younger sibling? Exactly. Instead, what if this hiding inside the animatronic thing is actually meant to be representing William and Crying Child? It could make sense, given that Crying Child would have thought his dad was trying to help him at first too, only to feel betrayed when he realized what was actually going on. And William is the only other character we know to have someone hiding inside them other than other animatronics. Just saying. And it's 6, Released. At this point, Cassidy's soul has been released following the events of the Happiest Day minigame. We can even see this be proven to us in the survival logbook, which revealed Cassidy's name, since like I said, on the page talking about your happiest day, we see the puppet giving cake to a little girl who was drawn exactly how Cassidy is described in the book series. And the FNAF 3 endings also support this, since in the bad ending we can see the light on in Golden Freddy's head, you know, the one light that splashes to both eyes, and in the good ending that light isn't on anymore. So while some people think that she's not at rest due to her head not being there, we couldn't see her head even if the light was on. Like, we could only see it from the inside. So it being there, just in pitch black, is totally plausible and honestly expected. That's just how light works, and it's stupid to ignore the basic laws of the universe. Sure, we can have possessed robots, okay, that's fine, but nothing about that is going to change how light works. Okay, that's too much, even for Five Nights at Freddy's. And they should really fix those damn doors though. Halfway through into number 5, Andrew. The one you should not have killed ends up making an appearance in the Fazbear Frights books. Well, a version of the character does, since this one is named Andrew and is wearing an alligator mask. However, this version has way more in common with Crying Child than they do with Cassidy. Firstly, they're both male characters with dark hair. Secondly, Andrew at one point appears as a shadow as described in the story, and Nightmare in Ultimate Custom Night says, quote, "The shadow fears me," which could be what this moment in the book was referencing, since Ultimate Custom Night takes place during the events of the Man in Room 1280, only allowing William to wake up when he manages to survive. Either way, Andrew has more in common with Crying Child, which makes sense given that these books are meant to clear things up from the games so that we can move ahead with the lore. So the introduction of Andrew was clearly meant to demonstrate that Crying Child is the one you should not have killed. And at 4, He. When looking at Ultimate Custom Night, we find a lot of information about the one you should not have killed, since, they were introduced. Lines that also refer to the one you should not have killed call him a he, which some wrote off as confusion because of the animatronic Cassidy inhabits, but there is no way that they would call a spirit by their animatronic gender identity, okay? They'd be a spirit, not an animatronic. This has always bothered me. Because if Cassidy was possessing both William and Golden Freddy, she would still want to be referred to as Cassidy when not inside Golden Freddy, especially if Cassidy is really as vengeful as we thought, since, being called by the thing that you get stuffed into after being brutally murdered probably isn't gonna make a spirit too happy. Getting close to the end in number 3, Nightmare animatronics. The appearance of the Nightmare animatronics as well in Ultimate Custom Night is another indicator that the one you should not have killed is Crying Child. Since FNAF 4 ends with Crying Child dying, who else would know about the Nightmare animatronics that are literally nightmares? Nobody, especially not Cassidy. If Cassidy is the one you should not have killed, how would she have known what the Nightmare animatronics look like to have them torture William in Ultimate Custom Night? She just wouldn't be able to, it wouldn't make sense. The presence of the Nightmare animatronics in Ultimate Custom Night and after means that the one you should not have killed had to know what they look like. And since Crying Child saw them in a nightmare while in a coma and died after he saw them there is no possible way anyone else could know what they look like. They have a stomach mouth, probably because Crying Child saw Elizabeth get gotten by Baby, which would realistically make him fear the animatronics and the animatronic stomachs in case they also have a surprise claw that will eat you. It's just, it's the only thing that makes sense. And if you think that FNAF 4 isn't a dream, click up in the top right corner because we have a whole video about that. And ultimately, in at number 2, literary symmetry. Just like how Chuck had Jessica die in the same way as Mary Winchester in Supernatural, it seems that Scott Cawthon is taking that same idea and applying it to Five Nights at Freddy's. Also, can you tell I've been watching a lot of Supernatural? Since if we think about it, Crying Child and William are both put in the same position in their respective games. FNAF 4 has Crying Child lying in a coma, dying in the hospital, and Ultimate Custom Night has William laying in a coma, dying in the hospital, but also not dying because he's being possessed. Either way, they're both dealing with roughly the same thing, and I think that's why we got the Man in Room 1280, since Scott wanted to clarify that William wasn't in hell, but rather in a coma much like his son. It's great storytelling and it's not something that you can say Scott wouldn't do. In fact, Scott probably thought about this as soon as FNAF 4 was released, and thought that that's how William would have to end as well. Death like your son, but make it a little spicy, That's basically what Scott did, and it only serves as more evidence. There's no way it's a coincidence. Not in FNAF. In a fan base that is literally comparing hexadecimal color codes. There's no way that's a coincidence. Finally, in at number 1, Ultimate Custom Night voice lines. Finally, we come to one of the biggest pieces of evidence I feel proves that Crying Child is the one you should not have killed. So it's pretty well established at this point that in Ultimate Custom Night, the death lines are just the animatronics repeating what the one you should not have killed says, as we can see with the mediocre melodies, because we can hear the one you should not have killed behind them. And the voice casting was supposed to work as a young boy or a young girl. However, a majority of these lines end up having something to do with Crying Child. This is even more pertinent since we don't know a lot about Cassidy, so these being personalized is a very important detail. And then we have the addition of lines like, "I am remade, but not by you, by the one you should not have killed," and "I have always been hiding in your shadow," and most importantly, "Let me put you back together and take you apart all over again." All of these are references to the Crying Child. "I am remade" references William's promise to put his son back together as his child, and as his child, Crying Child would be in William's shadow to hide, since his father would make him feel protected, at least at first. And I don't think that we need an explanation for "let me put you back together," which I guess if you want one, is also a reference to that famous FNAF 4 line. But the thing is, how would anyone else know these things? Cassidy would have no way of knowing, and why would they talk about it if they did? Clearly, the one saying these lines has a bone to pick about this, and that person is Crying Child. The main piece of evidence I was looking for was that Cassidy would not share a vessel, so if Cassidy was possessing Golden Freddy, the amount of anger and agony that Cassidy has would not allow for another soul to possess the suit alongside her, no matter who it was, even if it was her killer's son, especially not her killer's son. So it's just Cassidy possessing Golden Freddy, I hear you asking? Because this would just be circumstantial and based on your opinion of how you see the character of Cassidy. You could see her as being more than willing to share the suit with William's son since they both suffered the same wickedness, right? Yes, and that is entirely true, except I have some ideas that would present an entirely different solution to this problem. Allow me to explain. Fazbear Frights has given us hints as to how the game world operates over the last year or so. So far, with 9 books in the series being released, with the 10th coming out on my birthday this year and an 11th shortly after. However, there is one book that I'd like to call attention to, and I'm sure you can all tell which one it's gonna be. In room 1280 of Heracles Hospital, something evil is keeping a man alive. A man with gruesome burns all over his body and an iron will to live. The man in room 1280 is the 3rd story in the 5th Fazbear Frights book, Bunny Call, the only Fazbear Frights book that I currently own, for good reason. I have the 10th pre-ordered though, don't worry. The story, written by Andrea Wagner, revolves around a man with, as the book's summary described, horrific burns all over his body. His organs are exposed, his face is missing, he has burn marks all over his body, and this man was taken off life support years prior to the story, yet somehow is still alive. The story ends with this horrifically damaged man being taken to a Fazbear Entertainment distribution center where he promptly explodes. This story is obviously meant to represent, or very well be, William Afton, who did end up escaping the FNAF 6 fire but was horrifically damaged because of it. The story was meant to show us that William had a soul possessing him, the soul of a young boy with curly black hair, rosy cheeks, and an alligator mask. The mask being in reference to the Happiest Day minigame from FNAF 2. This explained how William always came back, how he survived the spring locking, the FNAF 3 fire, the FNAF 6 fire, and how he possessed a hard drive to be scanned in FNAF VR. He was taken to the warehouse before his death. But one thing always really bothered me about this story. Who is that kid? From what I understand in the epilogue, the boy then becomes a second soul inside of the Stitch Wraith, and that's what made everyone think that Golden Freddy had 2 souls, but I don't think that's what the story was trying to tell us. There's always been some form of confusion around the one you should not have killed, the one who keeps torturing William in Ultimate Custom Night. We all thought that it was Cassidy, who we assumed to be Golden Freddy, who was the one doing it, that she had trapped William in purgatory and was making him relive the horrors that he caused over all those years. But that, with the release of this book, was disproven, since William wasn't in purgatory or hell, but rather his own mind, stuck in the hospital either on life support or just being kept alive by this spirit, meaning that this kid would have to be the main antagonist of that game, the one that we see shaking at the end if we manage to beat 50-20 mode. This presents 2 different outcomes, neither of which are what we first expected though. It's weird, but I'm gonna go over them, don't worry. First, the simple answer. The kid from the Fazbear Frights books was just a deviation meant to show us that William was possessed by someone, showing us how he was kept alive, meaning that someone in the games would most likely be Cassidy, and the one you should not have killed was not Golden Freddy. Cassidy in this case would not be able to be Golden Freddy, since while multiple souls can possess one thing in FNAF canon, we have not seen evidence that one soul can possess multiple things. In fact, that has been disproven time and time again in the series, with the puppet having to give life to the animatronics after they've had a soul, or I guess agony, inside of them. This would mean that Golden Freddy was either possessed by another soul, or that everything having to do with Golden Freddy is an illusion. The other outcome would be that this kid from the books, the boy with the alligator mask, is Crying Child. that William's son, after being sent to the hospital and put in a coma by Fredbear, went on to possess his father and keep him alive after learning of his misdeeds. This is just as likely a scenario for me, if not even more likely, since it explains a lot of what we hear and see from characters in Ultimate Custom Night, such as Nightmare Fredbear, whose appearance should only be known to the crying child, but it presents itself in William's nightmare, as well as multiple lines such as "we know who our friends are, and you are not one of them," which is in reference to when the crying child dies at the end of FNAF 4, when psychic friend Fredbear says, "We are still your friends, do you still believe that?" But remember that those Fredbear plushies are actually cameras created by William to watch his son, meaning that this line, if it was coming from Fredbear, would really be coming from William, as would the line "I will put you back together," which is also referenced in Ultimate Custom Night, when Nightmare Fredbear says, "I am remade, but not by you, by the one you should not have killed." How would Cassidy know about this line, about the "I will put you back together," about the appearance of any of the Nightmare animatronics for that matter, unless she had seen them herself? If this was Crying Child, it would make a whole heck of a lot of sense, especially because of that line, "I am remade, but not by you." It sounds sassy, like I was remade, but you didn't do it like you said you would. Like if your friend falls through on a promise, so then you say like, "Oh, I went bowling, but not with you." I have a friend who does that a lot. He's not even really a friend anymore, just because he is not really a good person. He's not watching, so it's fine. This also explains Nightmare's line of "the shadow fears me," which I originally thought was meant to be about William fearing death, since the purple of the purple guy was meant to represent a shadow. But the one thing that made me sure about this theory was the fact that the alligator mask boy from The Man in Room 1280 is described as a shadow. If this is the crying child who was being referenced as a shadow, it would explain this line. Nightmare is the final antagonist of FNAF 4, the one that crying child fears the most, the representation of death, of William's wickedness. The crying child has to be the one who possesses William. I mean, it makes sense. William was there when crying child died. The Golden Freddy suit wasn't, but William was. When Crying Child died in the hospital, we know that from his lines going through psychic friend Fredbear, he was there with his son. As for why Golden Freddy is moving at the end of the game though, that could simply be a visual way of showing us that William would be back in the next game, by having one of his victims convulsing. Or it could be Crying Child showing William a version of the Fredbear plush. I think that this has to be the explanation, and if not, then Scott needs to fix his narrative structure, because not only does this make sense, it works in a story sense as well, and honestly fits so many things into place, and feels good in a narrative sense. There we have it, friends, my explanation as to how we were wrong about Golden Freddy. This theory makes so much sense to me, and honestly I didn't expect to come to that conclusion. The idea that I had in my head going into it was totally different than when I finished. The one you should not have killed is Crying Child. I mean, even William would consider him the one that you should not have killed.